The entire command team of a U.S. Navy destroyer got fired, not for combat failure, not for navigation accident, for fireworks. Commercial fireworks, purchased with ship funds, secretly loaded onto one of the most powerful destroyers in the American fleet. And fireworks were just one item on the ban list. The full list of things you cannot bring aboard a U.S. Navy destroyer will change the way you think about these ships, because several of them have already ended careers at the highest levels of American naval command.
The rules governing what goes aboard a Navy destroyer exist for reasons most civilians never think about. Every single one of them was written in response to something: a fire, a failure, a death, or a scandal. These aren't bureaucratic formalities. They are lessons written in steel, and what they reveal about life aboard a warship will change the way you think about these ships entirely. If you've always believed America's destroyers represent the gold standard of naval discipline, drop the word ironclad in the comments right now. Let's see how many of you are already thinking the way the Navy does. Here are the 7 things you are not allowed to bring on board.
Number 1. Alcohol. This is where we start, because this is where the story starts, and it goes back farther than most people realize. On the 1st of July, 1914, the U.S. Navy went completely dry. Secretary of the Navy, Josephus Daniels, issued General Order 99. That order declared, and I'm paraphrasing the official language here, that the use or introduction of alcoholic liquors aboard any naval vessel was strictly prohibited, and that commanding officers would be held directly responsible for enforcement. 112 years ago, and that order has never been lifted. Here's what stops most people when they first read this history. The Navy didn't go dry because sailors were irresponsible. The Navy went dry because Josephus Daniels believed it. He was a committed prohibitionist before national prohibition ever became law. He used his office to make the entire U.S. fleet his personal experiment. The irony is that it worked. Combat readiness improved, discipline improved, and by the time Prohibition ended nationally in 1933, the Navy had no interest in reversing course. Ships do carry a small medical stock of alcohol, but it requires the ship's medical officer or the captain personally to authorize its release. It is not a social supply. It is a medical one. There is one narrow exception most people have never heard of. In 1980, the Secretary of the Navy quietly authorized what became known informally as Beer Day. If a crew had been continuously underway for 45 days or more, each sailor could receive 2 beers. That is the full extent of the exception. 2 beers. After 45 days at sea, on one of the most powerful warships ever built. And that single fact tells you everything about how seriously the U.S. Navy takes this rule.
Number 2. Illegal drugs.
If alcohol gets a century-old ban with a narrow medical exception, illegal drugs get no exceptions at all. The governing document here is OPN AVINST 5350.4E, the Navy's Alcohol and Drug Misuse Prevention and Control Instruction, last updated in March of 2022. The language is direct. Drug abuse undermines combat readiness. It is incompatible with military discipline. It is a severe detriment to mission readiness. That's not bureaucratic language for the sake of it. That's the Navy telling you exactly what it considers the stakes. The Department of Defense maintains a banned substance list that goes far beyond the obvious. It includes synthetic cannabinoids, which means CBD falls under scrutiny in many contexts. It includes a long list of dietary supplements whose active ingredients overlap with controlled substances. Sailors face regular urinalysis, and a positive test doesn't just mean disciplinary action. It can mean the end of a naval career entirely.
What's worth understanding here, especially for anyone who has served, is that the Navy is not trying to punish its sailors with these rules. It's trying to protect them and protect everyone around them. You cannot operate an Aegis combat system with a crew that is anything less than fully sharp. Now, we're 2 items in, and both of them feel intuitive. Nobody is shocked that a warship bans alcohol and drugs. But starting with item 3, the list starts to get genuinely surprising. And the reason behind each ban is where this story becomes something else entirely.
Number 3. Personal firearms. Here is a detail that stops people cold the first time they hear it. A U.S. Navy destroyer carries Tomahawk cruise missiles. It carries torpedoes, deck guns, and surface-to-air missiles. And the sailors operating all of that hardware cannot bring their own personal guns aboard. The ship's armory contains officially issued weapons. Those weapons belong to the U.S. Navy. They are signed out, accounted for, and returned after use. A sailor's personal firearm, the one sitting in a safe at home, stays home. Navy regulations require that privately owned firearms be registered with the installation security officer when brought on to a naval base. Aboard a deployed destroyer, there is no registration process. There is no provision. The answer is simply no. The reasoning is operational. Space is at an absolute premium. Accountability for every weapon aboard a warship is non-negotiable. A single, unaccounted personal firearm creates an accountability gap that Naval Command will not tolerate, and in an enclosed environment carrying enough ordnance to sink a ship, the consequences of that gap are not theoretical.
Number 4. Fireworks. This one has a story attached to it that I want to make sure you hear, because it is one of the most remarkable command failures in recent U.S. Navy history. In 2015, the commanding officer of the guided missile destroyer USS Bainbridge, DDG-96, authorized the purchase of nearly $1,500 worth of commercial fireworks using the ship's morale, welfare, and recreation funds. The plan was a 4th of July display for the crew. The fireworks were purchased from a company called Phantom Fireworks. They included items with names like the Beast Unleashed and the Swashbuckler 72 Shot. Rigid-hulled inflatable boats were dispatched in a late-night operation to pick up the fireworks from a Virginia Beach inlet. The pyrotechnics were then loaded onto a U.S. Navy warship and stored aboard. This directly violated Navy instructions. MWR funds are explicitly prohibited from being used for hazardous activities, and Navy policy prohibits commercial fireworks from being stored aboard a ship, full stop. When a prospective weapons officer raised concerns and confronted leadership directly, the fireworks were quietly removed from the ship and loaded into the commanding officer's personal car. The funds were never reimbursed. The investigation that followed was 149 pages long. It was released through a Freedom of Information Act request, and the result was the simultaneous relief of the commanding officer, the executive officer, and the command master chief of the USS Bainbridge. The entire command triad gone at once. The last time the Navy had removed all 3 top leaders of a ship simultaneously was a separate incident years earlier. It is that rare. Why does the Navy draw this line so absolutely? Because a destroyer is not a backyard. It is a steel hull packed with aviation fuel, ordnance, missile propellant, and 270 human beings in an enclosed space at sea. An uncontrolled fire on a warship is one of the most lethal events in naval history. The USS Forrestal fire in 1967 killed 134 sailors in a single afternoon. The Navy learned that lesson. It wrote it into policy. And when a commanding officer decided the policy didn't apply to him, on one of the most decorated destroyers in the fleet, the Navy fired everyone at the top.
Number 5. Unlawful gambling.
The same USS Bainbridge investigation that uncovered the fireworks scandal also confirmed that unlawful gambling was taking place among the ship's officers, another violation cited in the official investigation report and the USNI News account of the relief. Gambling is prohibited under U.S. Navy regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The Commander's Quick Reference Legal Handbook for Naval Officers lists gambling specifically among prohibited activities subject to disciplinary action. The reasoning is not just moral, it's operational. Money disputes, debt, and the social friction that comes with gambling can destroy unit cohesion on a ship where the crew cannot simply walk away from each other. At sea, there is no exit. The Navy cannot afford a crew divided by who owes who. And here is what makes the Bainbridge case truly remarkable. We're not talking about junior enlisted sailors running a card game in the berthing area. We're talking about officers, the people responsible for disciplining everyone else. Which brings us to the part of this story I genuinely was not ready for when I first dug into the research.
Number 6. Pornography on government systems, and the admiral who learned this the hard way. Most people assume rules about electronic conduct apply to junior sailors. What happened in 2015 proves that assumption completely wrong. Rear Admiral Rick Williams was the commander of Carrier Strike Group 15. That is one of the most senior operational commands in the entire U.S. Navy. He had served for decades. He commanded a frigate. He led Destroyer Squadron 26. He served as Deputy 5th Fleet Commander directing maritime operations in support of Operations Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. And when investigators confronted him, his first words were, "I'm guilty." Investigators established that Rear Admiral Williams spent approximately 4 hours during one exercise and 5 hours during a second exercise, 9 hours total, viewing pornographic and sexually explicit websites on a Defense Department computer aboard a U.S. Navy ship while underway. He was relieved of command on the 9th of January 2016. He went to Admiral's Mast, the Navy's term for non-judicial punishment, where Vice Admiral Nora Tyson of 3rd Fleet found him guilty of violating a lawful order and conduct unbecoming an officer and a gentleman. Every sailor on a U.S. Navy ship goes through mandatory computer use training before deployment. Rear Admiral Williams had given that training to others for decades. He told investigators the pornography had started with pop-ups and that he had continued because, in his words, it was available. Here's what that case actually tells us about Navy policy. The prohibition on pornographic material on government systems is not a suggestion, it is a lawful order. Violating it does not just affect the individual, it represents a breach of the trust that an entire strike group places in its commander, the Navy Relieved Flag Officer, a 1-star admiral, the first 1-star firing since 2013. And the broader rule behind this, governing shared spaces and public displays on Navy ships, goes back to 1981. Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Thomas Hayward issued guidelines that year prohibiting the display of any material that was obscene or showed bad taste within the working and living spaces of Navy vessels. That standard has governed ships for over 4 decades. The lesson from Rear Admiral Williams isn't just that the rule applies to everyone, it's that the Navy enforces it against everyone. Rank does not create exceptions. Decades of service do not create exceptions. Seniority does not create exceptions. That detail is the one that redefines how most people think about naval discipline. Number 7. Unauthorized communication devices.
A U.S. Navy destroyer at sea is one of the most electronically sensitive environments on Earth. The Aegis Combat System, the SPY radar, the communications arrays, all of them operate within specific frequency ranges. All of them depend on electronic discipline to function without interference. And that is exactly why certain personal electronics are flatly banned. The official prohibited items list for U.S. Navy vessels includes ham radios, communication scanners, wideband receivers, satellite phones, personal satellite dish and receiver equipment, unauthorized routers, and emergency position indicating radio beacons known as EPBurbs. The reasons stack on top of each other. First, operational security. Every unauthorized transmission from a ship at sea is a potential intelligence gift to an adversary. A destroyer's position, speed, and heading, all of it can be inferred from electronic signals if the wrong device activates at the wrong time. Second, Electromagnetic interference. The ship's own systems are calibrated to operate in a specific electromagnetic environment. A personal device transmitting on the wrong frequency doesn't just break a rule, it can degrade the ship's ability to detect a threat, communicate with fleet command, or guide a weapon to its target. Third, accountability. Every electronic device brought aboard a U.S. Navy warship must be registered and barcoded. That process exists because theft at sea is a real problem. You cannot simply step off the ship to file a police report. The Navy tracks every registered device. Unauthorized devices fall outside that system entirely, and an untracked device with wireless capability is a security problem the Navy takes with the same seriousness as an untracked weapon. One former sailor explained it simply in public comments. The ship requires a barcode sticker on every registered personal device. But the honor system that once governed that process has given way to stricter controls as the electronic threat environment has grown more sophisticated. Think about what USS Carney faced in October of 2023, steaming through the Red Sea on a routine deployment when it suddenly found itself defending against a sustained ballistic missile and drone attack from Houthi forces. That crew, on a single guided missile destroyer, intercepted more airborne threats in a single engagement than most ships see in a career. In that environment, a single unauthorized transmitting device is not an inconvenience, it is a liability that could cost lives.
7 items, 7 rules, each one backed by a specific reason: a fire, a scandal, a court case, or a century of hard-won operational discipline. What this list actually reveals is how seriously the U.S. Navy approaches the environment of a warship. Every rule here exists because someone, somewhere, pushed a boundary, and the Navy responded by making sure no one ever pushes it the same way again. That is not bureaucracy. That is institutional memory. The men and women serving aboard destroyers today operate inside one of the most demanding and disciplined professional environments in the world. These rules are part of what makes that possible. If this video gave you a new perspective on what life aboard a Navy destroyer actually looks like, hit the like button and subscribe. There is a great deal more where this came from.